This is Madam Reed when it comes to betrayal. People always love to discuss the tears, the arguments, and those hysterical late nights. But the real counterattack is often silent. It doesn't need an audience or even for the opponent to be present. It happens in the instant you decide to close your heart, in the second your finger presses cancel reservation. This is a story about Kristen. She didn't ask why, nor did she cry and beg to stay. She simply, on that foggy San Francisco night, cut herself out of a rotting relationship, then clean and sharp, like excising a tumor. Here is the truth of the story. Bruce thought he was so clever. In this world, most people who treat their partners like fools think of themselves as geniuses in control of everything. That night, the fog in San Francisco was heavier than usual. So damp and cold, it felt like it could seep into your bones. Kristen had just finished showering, originally looking forward to this graduation trip she'd been planning for 3 months, Dan Highway Yi, a convertible, a cliffside hotel. This wasn't just a trip, it was a milestone in her 3-year career as a good girlfriend. For this trip, she'd used her internship wages to book the best hotel and even bought the vintage camera that Man had casually mentioned. But some truths always arrive uninvited with the cold wind. The sliding door to the balcony wasn't closed properly. Bruce's voice, carrying a flippancy Kristen had never heard before, slipped through that gap. "Come on, Marcus. Who wants to go to Highway E to see those Cookie Dan Cutter cliffs and ocean? That is something retired old folks do." A crisp click of the lighter Dan that was the sound of lies beginning to burn. Bruce took a deep drag of his cigarette, his tone dripping with the smugness of someone about to pull off a successful cheat. "I've got a better plan. As long as I can handle things with Kristen, I can change my ticket to Las Vegas. Yvonne says there is a pool party there that is absolutely insane. That girl is pure fire Jan when you're with her. You never know what is going to happen next." Kristen, standing in the shadows of the living room, still had water dripping from the towel in her hands. Her blood felt frozen, but her mind was crystal clear. 10 minutes ago, she was still folding that white linen dress. Now she stood like an outsider, listening to her own boyfriend belittle their relationship. "So how are you planning to explain this to Kristen?" On the other end of the phone was Marcus, his voice hesitant. See, even the accomplice thought this was going too far. "Just make up some excuse," Bruce chuckled, his laughter an insult to Kristen's intelligence. "I'll say my grandmother on the East Coast suddenly got seriously ill and I need to fly there urgently. You know how Kristen is Dan, she is so understanding. As long as I act anxious enough, she'll definitely offer to let me go." Understanding in relationships. This word is often synonymous with easy to push around. Bruce continued his performance. "These 3 years with her, sure, it has been stable, but way too boring. She is like the weather in San Francisco, always that lukewarm overcast. Every day it is either painting or cooking. Her life planned out like an Excel spreadsheet. Compared to Yvonne, who can ignite your passion at any moment, Kristen is literally like a cup of plain water that is gone cold." Shot suggestion closed in up on Kristen's hands, nails digging deep into her palms, but her face shows no expression. Camera pans over the neatly packed suitcase with that vintage camera resting on top. Then the shot cuts to the computer screen, faint blue light illuminating Kristen's terrifyingly calm face. In that moment, many women would choose to rush out, smash that phone, demand to know what these 3 years meant. But Kristen didn't. She studied art and she understood composition. And she understood negative space. Since he found this cup of plain water boring, might as well let him die of thirst in the desert. She retreated to the bedroom, gently closing the door. No tears, not even a tremble. She opened her laptop. On the screen was that folder named Pacific Dream. Inside were all the reservations for this trip. The couple's set menu at the Michelin restaurant, tandem kayaking, that notoriously hard Dan-to-Dan Book Big Sur Cliff Hotel, all guaranteed and prepaid with her credit card. Since he wanted excitement, she'd give him excitement. The sound of mouse clicks was exceptionally clear in the quiet room. 1 click, 2 clicks, cancel. Cancel, cancel everything. Every click felt like performing a precision surgery, excising the rotten flesh called love. The booking terms were clear, Dan cancel, Hours in advance. Most fees refunded. Finally, the ordinary sedan rented for 2, cancel. In its place, a flame Dan red Mustang convertible. Even if the rental was expensive, that seat belonged to her alone. Some debts were just starting to be settled. Bruce pushed the door open and came in, carrying the smell of smoke and lingering cold. Kristen was blowed and drying her hair with her back to him. In the mirror, Bruce quickly adjusted his expression, Dan brows furrowed, eyes melancholic. The sky is falling, look rapidly piled onto his face. If the Oscars had a Best Scumbag Performance Award, Bruce would definitely take home that little golden statue. Kristen, he murmured, his hand settling on her shoulder. His voice was a raw, gravelly sound, perfectly laced with a tremor of distress. I need to tell you something awful. I just got a call from my family. My grandmother's taken a turn for the worse and they've rushed her to the ICU. What a classic script. Grandma was always that convenient prop who needed to be critically ill at crucial moments. Kristen turned off the hairdryer and turned around. She looked at this man in the mirror. A few minutes ago, that mouth was saying Yvonne was a ball of fire, and now here he was playing the filial grandson. Her face showed the expression Bruce had been expecting: Zen worry, tenderness, unconditional trust. Oh my God, how could this happen? You have to go back right away. Nothing is more important than family. The moment she said this, Bruce visibly relaxed. That hint of smug satisfaction in his eyes was so quick, it was almost impossible to catch. But it didn't escape Kristen's eyes now. He hugged her tightly, as if to hide his guilty conscience. But our graduation trip, that is what we planned together. I really wanted to go to Big Sur with you. It is okay, Bruce. Kristen gently patted his back, feeling the stench now emanating from this embrace. We can travel any time, but you only have one grandmother. Don't worry about me. Go book your ticket. Bruce was deeply moved. He planted a kiss on her forehead, cold and fake. You're so wonderful, Kristen. The luckiest thing in my life is meeting you. Me too, Kristen responded softly. But inside, she was sneering. Yeah, meeting you. Let me see clearly what trash really looks like. That is actually a kind of luck, Zan. At least I won't waste the rest of my life sorting through recyclables. At night, they lay in bed, back to back, under the covers. Bruce's flame screen flickered faintly. Zan heaped with flame of his. Meanwhile, Kristen lay with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Sirens occasionally pierced the night sky outside the window. But her heart was as calm as dead water. She didn't expose him, because exposing him would only bring a meaningless argument and a few insincere apologies. What she wanted wasn't an apology, and she wanted him to pay the price. Some punishments can only be triggered once the prey has fully walked into the trap. 5 a.m. the next day, before dawn, Bruce got up to make his act convincing. He didn't even bring those flashy vacation shirts, Dan, just a few basic ones. He left a note on the nightstand: wait for me to come back. Love you. As the door closed, Kristen immediately sat up in bed, her eyes clear. not a trace of sleepiness. The camera followed her movements as she packed her bags swiftly and decisively. The moment the door closed, Kristen felt like she'd finally dropped the sandbag she'd been carrying for so long. She didn't stay a second longer in that apartment full of lies. She started packing her bags this time. The suitcase no longer had those pink accessories bought to cater to Bruce's taste, no longer had those art books he didn't like. She swept that ill-fitting hoodie, that couple's photo frame, all into a cardboard box, sealed it with tape, and tossed it into a corner of the hallway, just like this moldy relationship abandoned in a corner. She only took her sketchbook, her camera, and her true self. When she walked out of the apartment building, San Francisco's early morning was still shrouded in a gray Xan blue mist. The streets were empty and silent, the cries of seagulls sounding particularly shrill. This was the morning of a breakup, and also the morning of a new beginning, the rental car parking lot. That red Mustang was particularly eye-catching. Like a burning flame, it looked out of place in the dim morning light. The one handling the paperwork was a young black man with dreadlocks. He looked at Kristen standing alone, then at that flashy car, and let out a whistle. Well, driving this car to Highway E alone. But that's girl, is this a breakup healing trip? Sometimes. A stranger's intuition is sharper than the person beside you in bed. Kristen took the keys, the corners of her lips curling up. It was her first genuine smile in days. No, this is the beginning of a new life. She got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The deep rumble made her heart resonate with it. She pressed the convertible button, and the cool air instantly rushed in. A bit cold, but incredibly refreshing. She didn't head straight for the highway, but instead took a detour to Bruce's favorite bagel shop. Every weekend before, rain or shine, she would wait in line here for half an hour, just to buy him a freshly baked smoked salmon bagel. Back then she thought it was love, but now it seemed like nothing more than pathetic people pleasing. Through the car window, she watched that familiar line. Among those faces full of anticipation, were there people as foolish as she once was? Kristen sat in the car watching the crowd queuing outside the window. Kristen didn't stop. Flooring the gas pedal, the red sports car roared past. The camera pulls up, watching the red car leave a red afterimage on the street, driving resolutely toward the bridge. She floored the gas pedal. The Mustang roared past without the slightest pause. Goodbye, smoked salmon bagel, goodbye. The Kristen who built herself worth on pleasing others. The moment the car drove onto the Bay Bridge, the eastern skyline cracked open a golden seam. The rising sun pierced through the heavy clouds, dyeing the cables of the Golden Gate Bridge a brilliant gold from the car stereo. Deafening rock music filled the entire space. The wind blew her hair into a complete mess, but she didn't care. She gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other reaching out the window, feeling the wind pressure from 70 miles per hour. Just then, the phone on the passenger seat lit up. It was Bruce. The message came with a photo of him in the airport lounge. The background deliberately avoided the flight information on the display screen, showing only his worried face. Babe, I'm already at the airport. My mind is such a mess. So worried about Grandma. Are you awake? Remember to eat breakfast. At this moment, Kristen could even picture his face, Dan sending this message, then turning around to board the flight to Las Vegas with his arm around Yvonne. That kind of Dan-faced acting was absolutely disgusting. Right after Instagram popped up a notification from her special follows. It was Yvonne. It was Yvonne's story. A corner of 2 first Dan class tickets, 2 hands intertwined. On the man's wrist was that slightly worn sports watch caption. A spontaneous trip, this is my favorite adventure, Guess where? That watch was the birthday gift Kristen bought for Bruce last year with her scholarship money. All her wishful thinking turned to ashes in this moment. If there was still pain before, now there was only bones and deep coldness. This was no longer speculation. This was a declaration of war. Kristen pulled over at a roadside lookout. She didn't block them yet. It wasn't time yet. Some shows just aren't as good when the audience leaves early. She took out a sticky note from her bag, originally meant for a travel list for Bruce. Now, she scrawled a line of English across it with bold, sweeping strokes using a black marker. "Enjoy Vegas. I'm taking the highway." She didn't send this note to anyone. Instead, she took a photo of it against the Pacific Ocean and the rising sun ahead. This would be her final curtain call, but it had to be posted at the perfect moment. Then, she opened all the hotel and car rental apps on her phone and did one final check. Perfect. All reservations under Bruce's name had been successfully canceled. That luxurious suite on the Las Vegas Strip that he used to show off to Yvonne was actually secretly guaranteed and booked by Kristen using her supplementary card because she was worried about his financial situation. Bruce was always like this, putting on a show he couldn't afford. And the one footing the bill was always his sensible girlfriend. Now, she unhesitatingly removed the card link and canceled the guarantee. It was peak tourist season right now, and hotels in Las Vegas not only had skyrocketing prices, but were also completely booked. Imagine the scene. When they land, excitedly rush to the front desk, ready to start their passionate getaway, only to find the reservation canceled. And Bruce's always Dan Max Dan Out credit card couldn't possibly cover the sky Dan High Walk Dan in rate. That expression would surely be more spectacular than the Grand Canyon. After doing all this, Kristen set her phone to Do Not Disturb mode. Highway E is called the most beautiful road in the world, not just because of the ocean views, but also because of its unique, almost savage primitiveness. Especially after entering the Big Sur section, the signal towers seem to have been swallowed by this ancient redwood forest. The signal bars in the top left corner of her phone had completely turned to no service. If it were before, Bruce would definitely have complained non-stop. He was a typical signal anxiety patient who would feel uncomfortable all over if he didn't scroll through social media for 5 minutes. But now, looking at those grayed Dan Out signal bars, Kristen only felt it was a peace bestowed by God. No more fake check Jan ends, no more provocative posts. The world was peaceful. She stopped by Bixby Bridge. The famous arch bridge spanned the cliffs with churning seawater below. She used to fantasize about taking those influencer photos here with Bruce, holding hands and running toward the horizon. She had rehearsed that composition countless times in her head. But now, standing here alone, facing this magnificent landscape, she realized how narrow that so-Jan called couple romance seemed before nature's masterwork. Kristen set up the tripod in the frame. There was only her red dress fluttering loudly in the sea breeze. Back to the camera, arms spread wide to embrace the ocean. Without that bossy man, the image radiated a freedom and strength she'd never felt before. The photos turned out amazingly well. That day, she drove through areas with no signal. When hungry, she ate burritos by the roadside. When tired, she watched elephant seals sunbathe. It wasn't until evening that she arrived at the Cliffside Hotel. This was originally a surprise prepared for Bruce's birthday. Now, this luxury suite with panoramic floor, Zan-to-Zan ceiling windows, and a private terrace belonged only to her. The receptionist looked up the reservation and seemed surprised. "Just one guest, Miss Kristen?" "Yes, just one." She smiled and handed over her credit card. "Change the champagne dinner for 2 to a seafood platter for 1. Also, Send a bottle of Napa Valley's best white wine to the room. Walking into the room, the setting sun hung right above the horizon, dyeing the entire room a warm orange Jan red. She poured herself a glass of wine and walked barefoot onto the balcony. That is when the hotel wide Jan Fi automatically connected. Her phone started buzzing like crazy, like a whole day's worth of pent. Danup floodwater had finally found an outlet. Dozens of missed calls, all from Bruce, and countless IM messages from initial confusion to later fury. Kristen, where are you? Why aren't you answering? Why did you cancel the hotel? Do you know how embarrassing it was for me at the front desk? Damn it, why won't my credit card go through? That is linked to your supplementary card. Answer the phone right. Immediately looking at these messages, Kristen took a sip of wine. She could picture Bruce in the noisy lobby, going from smug to utterly humiliated to keep up his rich young heir persona in front of Yvonne. He'd probably already broken into a cold sweat. Right after that came Yvonne's posts. 5 hours ago, she'd posted a photo in the Caesar's Palace lobby. Just a lonely suitcase with a caption full of complaints. This is the Sojan called surprise. Been waiting here for 2 hours. Can some people be a little more reliable? Looks like reality had already slapped them in the face. Kristen swiped through the screen and opened her Instagram burner account. She uploaded that solo shot at Bixby Bridge, along with the glass of white wine catching the sunset in her hand. Location, Big Sur, caption was a blue heart. Just then, Bruce's call came in again. Kristen looked at the caller ID flashing continuously on her phone screen. The background was a magnificent sunset. Kristen didn't hang up directly. Hanging up directly would be letting him off too easy. She answered the call, set it on the table, and let the sound of the waves greet him first. Kristen, you finally answered. Bruce's exasperated roar broke the tranquility, the background filled with noisy chatter and slot machine sound effects. What the hell are you doing? Why did you cancel the hotel? I'm in Vegas now, and my card won't work either. Do you have any idea how much Idzan? His voice came to an abrupt halt. He too realized he had let something slip. Kristen picked up the phone, her voice as calm as a windless sea. Vegas, weren't you on the East Coast taking care of your sick grandmother? The other end of the line fell into a deathly silence. This silence was more satisfying than the shouting before. A few seconds later, Bruce started stammering. It is because Grandma was transferred. Yeah, transferred to the best hospital here in Vegas. I just got here too. I was just so worried that liars always underestimate other people's intelligence. So the best hospital in Vegas is at Caesar's Palace. Kristen cut him off breezily. Does the ICU there also offer roulette and champagne service? Kristen, you just let me explain, Bruce. She watched the last glimmer of sunset sink into the sea, the sky darkening, just like the end of this relationship. No need to explain since you love thrills so much. I'll give you an even more thrilling gift. What? That supplementary card of yours. I've already reported it lost. Also, your apartment lease expires next month, and I've notified the landlord I won't be renewing. Kristen, are you crazy? I'm completely broke now. How am I supposed to get back? That is your problem, just like you find highway boring. I also find it boring to support a shameless freeloader Manzan child. Have fun in Vegas. Don't keep Yvonne waiting too long. Hang up, block, all in one swift motion. The next day, she checked out and continued north, arriving at the art town of Carmel in a gallery called Sea Mist. She encountered a painting, and a painter named David. The painting was called Survivor, depicting a lighthouse in a storm. The brushstrokes were wild, but the lighthouse's light was delicate and warm. Did you paint this? Kristen asked. To be precise, I painted it during the worst time of my life. David was a man in his 30s with deep, Jan-set eyes. He said he had just ended a marriage back then, feeling like he could be drowned at any moment. Two wounded souls found a strange resonance amidst the smell of turpentine. David wasn't Bruce. He didn't care how much a painting could sell for. Jan, he cared about the emotions behind the lines. Your technique is perfect, Kristen. David looked at her sketch. But you're hiding yourself too deep. You always try to soften the edges with gentle lines, just like trying to accommodate everything in life. But this makes your work lose its tension. This sentence struck her like lightning. For the past 3 years, she had been cutting her feet to fit the shoes. Try this. David handed her a palette knife. Don't think about how to make it pretty. Scrape out all your anger, grievances, and hatred. The palette knife fiercely piled deep red, ink blue, and bright white paint onto the canvas. Kristen's arm swung forcefully, her gaze focused and fervent. Quick cuts showed the texture of the paint and the sweat on her forehead. It was a catharsis. When she stopped, the canvas was a chaotic and intense storm. But at the center, a streak of determined brightness broke through the surface. This is the real you, David said. A work with soul. When she left that day, she took with her that still Jan wet painting and also brought back the confidence she had lost long ago. Back at the hotel, a message from Yvonne arrived. It was a hospital payment bill. Kristen Jan-senpai, Bruce had stomach cramps from excessive anxiety and is now in the ER. We don't have enough cash on us. Can you unfreeze the supplementary card first? Saving him is what matters. Kristen laughed out loud. Stomach cramps, more like his stomach hurt from being scared of not having money to pay the bills. She sent her first and also last message to Yvonne. Since you love thrills, enjoy the feeling of your heart racing in the ER. Friendly reminder, American ERs let you get treated first and pay later. So let him slowly work off his debt. Best wishes. A week later, Kristen returned to San Francisco. When the red Mustang's engine died at the return lot, she stroked the steering wheel, feeling an unexpected reluctance to part Zan, like saying goodbye to a comrade Zan in Zan arms. This week of solo travel had been a baptism. Back at the apartment, the musty smell of a long Zan unoccupied space hit her in the face. The cardboard box filled with Bruce's old stuff was still there in the corner of the entryway, like an abandoned orphan. She started packing her things, easel, paints, award certificates. As for the cheap furniture she'd bought to save money, she left it all behind. They belonged to the past, not to the New York she was about to head to. Just as she sealed the last box, the door lock clicked. Bruce pushed the door open and walked in, followed by a reluctant Jan-looking Yvonne. He looked like absolute shit. Stubble all over his face, leather jacket all wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. Seeing Kristen, he froze for a moment, then burst with joy and rushed over to hug her. Kristen, you're finally back. I knew you wouldn't abandon me. These past few days have been an absolute nightmare. Kristen stepped aside to dodge his embrace, like avoiding a bag of garbage. The smell, Jan, a mix of cheap perfume, cigarette smoke, and the stench of sweat from a long trip, Jan, made her nauseous. Don't touch me. Bruce awkwardly withdrew his hand, quickly switching to prodigal son returns mode, pointing at Yvonne and saying, "It is all her. She is the one who kept pestering me to go to Vegas and said if I didn't go, she'd spread rumors at school that I was a kept man. I only did it to protect our reputation." Enough. Kristen cut him off, even finding it amusing. This was the man she'd loved for 3 years, a coward who only knew how to shift blame onto women when problems arose. Yvonne suddenly looked up, shouting angrily, "Bruce, What the hell are you saying? You were the one begging me to take you to experience real life. The plane tickets were all charged to her card. Watching this dog, Xian eat, Xian dog drama unfold. The last ripple in Kristen's heart settled. She took out the silver Xian-plated bracelet he'd given her that Christmas, placing it on the shoe cabinet with a crisp snap. The apartment keys sat beside it. Kristen, where are you going? Bruce panicked, trying to grab her suitcase. We're supposed to go to New York to build our future. I wanted to promote the app to the East Coast too. That is my plan, not ours. Kristen pulled up her suitcase, looking him straight in the eyes. Besides, New York doesn't need parasites. She wheeled her suitcase past them. When passing by Yvonne, she paused. Congratulations, you won. This trophy is all yours. Hope your credit card limit can handle him for a while. Yvonne's face went pale instantly. The graduation ceremony at San Francisco Art Institute. Kristen deliberately wore that red lipstick she'd always been too reluctant to use. When she walked into the venue in her bachelor's gown, her friends were all amazed at how great she looked. She had landed an offer from a top New York studio, full of confidence. The crowd suddenly stirred. Bruce pushed his way through, holding a bouquet of cheap, somewhat wilted flowers. He wanted to use this public occasion to morally blackmail her with his so-dan called deep affection. Kristen, he shouted loudly, dropping to one knee. I know I've wronged you, but without you, my world is nothing but a barren wasteland. Will you forgive me? Let's start over. Scattered cheers, and jeers rose from around them. Those who didn't know the situation thought this was a romantic proposal scene. Kristen looked down at him condescendingly. This clown, thinking that as long as he knelt down, as long as there was an audience, he could force her to give in. She didn't take the flowers. Bruce, you know what? Her voice rang out clearly. On Highway 1, I realized something. Rather than clinging to a stone that doesn't know warmth or cold, it is better to be a free flower in the wind. Your so-jan called barren world is because you lost the host who was feeding you. Kristen. Bruce's face flushed red as he stood up. Do you really have to make everyone lose face? Is all this necessary over a little couple's quarrel? A little couple's quarrel? Kristen let out a cold laugh. She took out her phone and pulled up the screenshot from the video of Bruce with his arms around Yvonne dancing in Vegas. Then it was something Yvonne had posted on her story. And though it was deleted quickly, Kristen had saved it long ago. She held the screen up for everyone to see. You call taking your girlfriend's money to splurge in Vegas with another woman a fight, Bruce? Your dictionary needs an update. The crowd was in an uproar. The jeering turned into contemptuous whispers. Bruce panicked, reaching out to grab the phone. You crazy bitch. Invasion of privacy. Sophie and a few male classmates immediately blocked in front of Kristen. Enough, Bruce. Sophie said with disgust, stop embarrassing yourself. Looking at the mocking eyes around him, Bruce finally realized the game was up. He glared viciously at Kristen, threw down the bouquet, and fled the scene in disgrace. Watching his panicked, retreating figure, Kristen just felt like she'd swatted away a fly. After the ceremony ended, her phone buzzed. The sender was a studio in New York. Dear Kristen, we greatly admire your portfolio, especially the piece Rebirth. Looking forward to seeing you on Monday. Rebirth was the painting she'd made with a palette knife. Kristen looked at the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance, tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the joy of surviving a disaster. New York didn't have San Francisco's laid, back vibe. Here, there were only people on the run. 3 months into the job, Kristen was busy as a spinning top, but she didn't feel tired. Compared to the days of revolving around Bruce, This feeling of burning for herself was amazing. Bruce was like a ghost, occasionally trying to contact her, either texting long messages from different numbers or having people. Kristen ignored them all until that rainy night in late autumn. She saw Bruce huddled in the porch downstairs of her apartment building. In just half a year, he had aged 10 years, face covered in stubble, shivering. "Kristen." He looked at her like a stray dog. "I came to New York to find investors. It hasn't gone well. My wallet got stolen. Could I crash for one night? The couch is fine." Looking at this down Zan and Zan out man, Kristen felt not a shred of pity. Once, she would have taken out her savings to support him without hesitation. But that was for a lover, not a traitor. "There is no couch here." She took out two $20 dollar bills and handed them to him. "There is a Arsha Sid Zan Hour McDonald's across the street. Enough for you to sit through the night. Go to a shelter tomorrow." Bruce looked at the money, his expression utterly ugly. This was humiliation. But he still took it, because hunger had defeated pride. "Are you really this heartless? We loved each other once, at least. It is precisely because we loved each other that I'm giving you this money, instead of calling the cops." Kristen held her umbrella and swiped in. "Looking at you now, I just realize how terrible my taste was back then." The door closed, shutting out the wind and rain, and shutting him out too. Christmas Eve, 1 year later, on the big screen in New York's Times Square, works by the year's emerging designers were scrolling. Kristen's poster series is Shattered and Rebirth was prominently featured. "Hey, is that you?" A gentle voice came from beside her. It was David. He was wearing a cashmere coat, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. "David, what are you doing here?" "My art exhibition opens tomorrow. I wanted to try my luck and see if I could run into you." This was the kind of fate that only happens in movies. David pulled out a postcard Zan, the one Kristen had tucked in her sketchbook that had fallen out. On the back it read, "To the girl who braved the storm, the sun always rises." "Miss Rising Star Designer, may I have the honor of inviting you to be the first guest at my exhibition opening?" Kristen looked at him and placed her hand in his palm. Snowflakes drifted down. On this cold winter night, she finally understood that a true feels and good ending wasn't the fleeting pleasure of trampling a scumbag underfoot. It was when you look back and find that the past that once made you wish you were dead had already become the nourishment, and that better version of yourself was standing at the crossroads of the future, waiting to embrace you. This is Kristen's story. I'm Madam Reed. No matter what storm you're going through, remember, don't stop your car for anyone. The road is ahead, and the steering wheel is in your hands.